work and it's not mine. There's a little bit of mine, the summaries and conclusions, but overall it's not mine. So the topic here to reinstate is how to improve well-being, which is a thought again on Sunday. There's a will, there's a need for will, motivation, specifically intrinsic motivation. So the motivation must come from within. The change must come from within. So I've commented in my document that gratitude may arguably be the most important contribution to improving someone's well-being. So as long as someone's alive, is breathing, and has consciousness, can enter a conscious state, which means they can be aware of some things around them, then they're able to practice gratitude. The problem with gratitude is that it isn't practiced enough. That's the problem with gratitude. So there is a need in social aspects to improve people's practice of gratitude. And I have a picture here of a study, and I think I'll reference this one, and I'll share it when I'm editing this video. But it shows that grateful thinking produces the highest positive affect and the second least negative affect, second to the control on the negative effect, but it definitely outdoes the control on the positive effect. So grateful thinking is the most important, and a contradiction to that is that writing conditions produced more social anxiety than grateful thinking condition. So the people that were writing about their gratitude were afraid that someone else would read it, or that's the main issue, that someone else would read it and judge them. But grateful thinking, you can't really show evidence, even if it is spoken. The thinking and the speech can be changed through the execution. You can think about A and speak about B, and people will believe that B, but you're really just thinking about A. It's unlikely that will happen, because normally if you're thinking about A, you'll speak about A, but it is possible to happen. Dispositional gratitude, which is just gratitude overall. So these are all ways to promote social bonds. And this will lead me to my next topic, which is pro-social. Pro-social is really important in well-being. Pro-social is the ability to contribute to society. As I'm making this video for online audience, it is made in a pro-social manner. I am aiming to contribute to society with my skills, I suppose, that I have, and I've learned, and it's taken a lot of sacrifice for me to learn these skills, and I believe that the world can definitely contribute through this, because all the information is online, but not many people can find it because of some controversial ways, such as attention span, intrinsic motivation, and creativity. So there's one paper here is shown that high pro-social motivation, high intrinsic motivation, and creativity are all correlated for a beneficial health. So the best way to explain this is that someone who has high pro-social motivation and high intrinsic motivation will have higher creativity. Even if you have one or the other and they're not both simultaneously expressed at the same time, which are high pro-social motivation or high intrinsic motivation, if you have at least one, your creativity will go up. And creativity is very important because it allows the person to exhibit their personality and exhibit their ideas to the world in a very abstract sense. And the abstract sense goes a little bit away from logic and stoicism, but it makes the idea more socially applicable and it makes people think. I think that's why creativity is very important, because it makes you think. High pro-social motivation leads to high creativity. That's something that I may have copied. And then I've gone into something called positive psychology. And positive psychology is extremely important. It's going to enwrap the two topics of gratitude and pro-social in one, I think. That's the best way to explain it. And there's more things in positive psychology that it enwraps. So one topic here has stated that psychology after World War II became a science largely devoted to healing. Among the strengths built in the psychotherapy are courage, interpersonal skill, rationality, insight, optimism, honesty, perseverance, realism, capacity for pleasure, putting troubles into perspective, future-mindedness, and finding purpose. Now this is where it gets a little bit, I wouldn't say it's contradictive, but a little bit more intense, because when I read all these articles, then I draw conclusions on where to go next. What's the next chess move? Where do I go next? This is how I do my studies. I gain all this information, and maybe I'll find a phrase in the papers that I've read, and I investigate that phrase. Otherwise, or a word even. Otherwise, I will gain the idea in a whole, and then I'll say, oh, okay, I've seen what's going on here. This is where I need to go next. And in this paper, it was about how after World War II, psychology was devoted to healing, as I've said. And I wrote a question for thought. And there's no doubt any person with any sense of observation in society and in the world would say that these strengths that I have enlisted, such as courage and capacity for pleasure and putting troubles into perspective, honesty, perseverance, they are relieved from society at the moment. They're not as present and as dominant as they used to be. And I question this. Why are these strengths missing from society? And then I wrote, how is society today so related to post-World War II? And the conclusion that I drew is, funny enough, I related World War II to the past experience of 2020 during the coronavirus and the lockdowns, and I've stated that there was traumatic experiences from COVID-19 in relation to World War II, and I used AI a bit, and it showed me there was a lot more deaths caused in World War II. However, the 2020 coronavirus, it affected more people, but there was less deaths compared to World War II. So there is still a traumatic experience from coronavirus 2020 COVID-19. However, not as many people passed away. Now, I've stated that during or post, COVID-19 has left traumatic experiences on society that, as I quote, that I've read, that I've spoken, unable to shake off this trauma. So that's my next intention to go through. Now, while I've got that flow, I'm going to continue with this, explaining this one. And this document about COVID-19 and trauma, it has more structure than the last one of positive psychology and gratitude, pro-social behavior. This one I wrote a opening statement early on, and I wrote how COVID-19 and trauma may absolutely be the common disorder among all disorders among the population. It's not written as well as it should be, but the idea is there. Essentially that COVID-19 has left a slight, at the least, PTSD of what happened to society, the lockdowns, and everyone rushing to get vaccinated, and social distancing and masks. It was all a big distortion of what was normal reality prior to coronavirus. So there's no doubt that that has completely changed the world in a sense. Even if you go to some restaurants now, they still got the plastic screens to prevent the saliva from someone speaking and transmit the disease. It was all, I can't say it was nonsense, but it was a disruption in the flow of society prior to 2020. So I'm looking at the counteractivity of the trauma for some sort of solution, and that has been found in the next tab, which I'll explain later on. So this document is all about how COVID-19 has left traumatic stresses on people's psychological well-being. I don't want to get into too much detail because it's not as necessary as you think. The only thing that's necessary is that it has left a traumatic experience on the majority of society. That is a fact. And the quicker the society allocates that as a fact, the quicker we're able to find a solution. These videos are not about dictating the problem, but they're more about creating solutions to the factual problems that are occurring in society so that everyone is able to find peace or more peace with each other. I come onto this term called psychological first aid, and I was very interested by the term psychological first aid. It's a very good term. So if you ever hear me say PFA, it stands for psychological first aid. COVID-19 is a traumatic stressor. Okay, let me just read this one out. This is from a study. COVID-19 mental health and psychological first aid is a title. If you look that in Scholar, you'll find who that's written by. And then this is written in that article. Why COVID-19 pandemic is a traumatic stressor. Taken together, our findings support emerging research that COVID-19 can be understood as a traumatic stressor event capable of eliciting PTSD-like responses and exacerbating, sorry, I can't really pronounce that, other related mental health problems, e.g. anxiety, depression, psychosocial function, etc. So there's numbers and there's proof behind all of that, and that information actually doesn't come from COVID-19 mental health and psychological first aid. It comes from coronavirus disease, COVID-19, traumatic stress, probable risk factors, and correlates of post-traumatic stress disorder. That's the title that it comes from. And they studied New York residents who participated in a survey of hopelessness about the future. Many of them felt socially isolated, 40%, anxious, 44%, and depressed, 35%, at least half of the time during the week. I can't really remember if they record or the date of this, it's just very brief. But there's no doubt that those percentages are still above zero. Okay. So far, the solution has been about improving well-being, which is definitely important. And there's some studies that I've read that are looking at the collective, so the overall society well-being. They've stated that in westernized society that it's so dependent on individual well-being and it's away from collective well-being. But I'm happy to work one-on-one with people and work individual well-being as well as collective well-being. It's fine. But I'm saving time for people. This is the solution that I've found, and that solution are two terms, two labels: psychological first aid as one, and the second is resilience. There's one paper in 2023 about earthquakes. This doesn't have to do with COVID-19. It has to do with earthquakes, but the notion of psychological resilience is so prominent in this paper, which can definitely relate to any trauma that someone goes through. They scale something called STSS, which is a stress and trauma scale, and it clearly decreased post of the intervention compared to the control. And I will be hoping to put that graph that I'm looking at in this video. Resilience first aid. Okay. So resilience first aid or psychological first aid, there are some program structures, and that's very important because the structure gives some sort of foundation on how to improve traumatic experiences. Some of these program structures include reasoning, vision, collaboration, health, tenacity, and to go further, social connection and peer support, building relationships, explaining resilience and its role in preventing mental illness, which is a primer, emotional regulation. In reasoning, teaches cognitive resilience. In health, connection between physical well-being and resilience. Nutrition and exercise improved mental and emotional resilience. Now, there's one topic that I found that I haven't been able to track the title because sometimes I put all the information in and then I forget about the title, and then I'll go to a next article and then it's gone. So I have to go back and find the title of this. But this one article I've highlighted and underlined a lot in my document. self-efficacy, increase people's beliefs about the capability to manage stressful events regardless of their magnitude or intensity. That quote has gotten tracked back to early 2000s. Optimism, positive expectancy, PFA, based on efficacy and hope. So there's a need for optimism, definite need of optimism. There's something that I've highlighted that people will find very helpful. So the PFA supports the following interventions: remind individuals of the efficacy, encourage positive coping, reduce negative coping, enhance sense of control over ongoing stresses, teach individuals and families to problem solve and set achievable goals so they have repeated success experiences, and identify, amplify, and build on already exhibited strengths. Those words have been collected through several papers in the early 2000s, late 1990s. A lot of abbreviations for PFA. And that was the main. PFA is looking to improve traumatic stress symptoms and adaptive functioning for individuals after a traumatic event. I tried to investigate adaptive functioning, but adaptive functioning's just basically getting back to society, which is quite difficult for someone who has a traumatic experience. So it's quite important because we have stated and shown evidence that COVID-19 and that era have a traumatic experience on people. So PFA is a solution on how to improve traumatic stress symptoms and adaptive functioning for individuals after a traumatic event. So coronavirus was a problem and PFA is a solution. PFA is the first step to facilitate phased mental health care. PFA aims to reduce immediate stress and facilitate adaptive functioning. That's in another paper published in 2020. The main purpose of PFA is to instill feelings of safety, calmness, self and community efficacy, connectedness, and hope.